The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where people measured their success by the greenness of their lawns and the height of their hedges. It was a place of quiet streets, expensive SUVs, and a homeowners association led by a woman named Beatrice Vance. Beatrice was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them. If your trash cans were visible 5 minutes after the truck passed, you'd find a neon orange citation on your door. If your mailbox had a chip of paint missing, she'd send a formal letter quoting Article 4, Section 9, Community Aesthetics. Elias Thorne was her favorite target. I was a woodworker by trade, which meant my backyard often smelled of cedar and sawdust, a scent Beatrice once described in a meeting as industrial pollution. But the real trouble started when I installed my custom-built stone fire pit. The vanishing birch. "It's a fire hazard, Elias," Beatrice said one Tuesday morning, peering over my cedar fence. She was wearing a beige tracksuit and holding a clipboard like a shield. "It's built to code, Beatrice. I have the permit from the city," I replied, stacking a fresh delivery of seasoned white birch. "The HOA has higher standards than the city," she sniffed. "And that wood, it's an invitation for termites. You really should keep the pile smaller, much smaller." I ignored her. I loved my fireplace. There was nothing better than sitting out on a crisp autumn evening with a glass of bourbon watching the blue and orange flames dance. But a week later I noticed something odd. My stack of birch, expensive, kiln-dried wood looked thin. I didn't think much of it until the following Tuesday. I had counted the logs, 24 split pieces of birch. When I came home from work, there were 18. I looked at the fence. There were scuff marks on the wood. Someone had been leaning a ladder or a stool against it. My neighbor on the other side, Arthur, a retired high school teacher who spent his days birdwatching, spotted me investigating. "She's been doing it at dusk, Elias," Arthur whispered from behind his rose bushes. "Beatrice, she waits until you're at the shop. She brings a garden cart to the fence, reaches over and helps herself, says she's confiscating hazardous material for the safety of the block." Confiscating? I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with a fire pit. "She has a fireplace in her house, doesn't she?" "A massive one," Arthur nodded. "I saw the smoke coming from her chimney last night, smelled like birch." The escalation. I tried the direct approach first. I knocked on Beatrice's door. She opened it halfway, looking at me with practiced boredom. "Beatrice, someone is taking wood from my yard. Since you're so concerned with community safety, I thought you'd want to know." "Perhaps it's the wind, Elias," she said, her eyes flickering toward the large, ornate fireplace visible in her living room. I could see the distinct white bark of my birch logs glowing in her hearth. "Or perhaps a neighbor is simply helping you clean up your clutter. You really should thank them." She slammed the door. For the next 3 weeks, it became a game. I bought a lock for my gate. She used a reacher tool to grab logs over the fence. I covered the pile with a heavy tarp and weighted it with stones. She sliced the bungee cords. The woman was a thief with a savior complex. She believed that because I was violating the spirit of the neighborhood, she was entitled to my property. She wasn't just stealing wood, she was stealing my peace of mind. That's when the woodworker in me took over. I didn't want to call the police in Willow Creek. The police and the HOA board were often at the same Sunday brunch. I wanted a lesson. I wanted a teachable moment. The workshop experiment. I went into my shop and closed the door. I selected 4 perfect logs of oak, heavy, sturdy, and looking identical to the rest of my winter stash. Using a long bore drill bit, I hollowed out the center of each log, creating a cavity about 2 inches wide and 6 inches deep. I worked with the precision of a clockmaker. I didn't want to hurt anyone, I just wanted to create a spectacle she would never forget. In my younger days, I had worked in special effects for a local theater company. I knew exactly what I needed: black powder and a mix of copper salts. I filled the cavities with a specific ratio. The black powder wasn't enough to explode the log, the oak was too thick, and the ends were plugged with a mixture of sawdust and wood glue that would hold until the heat got intense. Inside, I added the chemical salts. I wasn't making a bomb, I was making a firework. The Trojans, as I called them, were placed strategically at the top of my woodpile on a Friday evening. I knew Beatrice's pattern. She liked to have a fire on Saturday nights while she hosted her standards and practices committee meetings. I sat by my window with the lights off watching the shadows. Sure enough, at 6:00 p.m. a shadow appeared over the fence. A long metal claw reached over, hooked one of my prepared oak logs and hoisted it away, then another, then a third. I felt a twinge of guilt, but then I remembered the $400 I'd spent on birch that she had already burned. The guilt vanished. The Saturday night social. Around 8:00 p.m., I saw the cars lining up in front of Beatrice's house. The board members were arriving. The Karens of the neighborhood were gathering to discuss the length of grass and the problematic color of Mr. Henderson's new shutters. I grabbed a lawn chair and sat in my dark backyard. The air was cold, and the smell of wood smoke soon began to drift over the fence. It started off normally. The faint sound of clinking wine glasses and shrill laughter drifted through the air. Beatrice was likely holding court, boasting about her leadership and her impeccable home. Then it happened. The first Trojan log must have reached the core temperature. Whoosh! A sudden, brilliant flash of emerald green light erupted from Beatrice's chimney. It was so bright it illuminated the entire cul-de-sac. It wasn't a bang, it was a sustained, roaring hiss like a jet engine made of magic. I heard a scream from inside the house. A few seconds later, pop FZZZT. The second log went off. This one was packed with strontium. A geyser of deep, crimson-red sparks shot 10 feet out of the top of her chimney, raining down onto her perfectly manicured and fire-resistant slate roof. It looked like a volcano was erupting in the middle of suburbia. I stood up, walking closer to the fence. The sounds coming from inside Beatrice's house were no longer those of a polite committee meeting. It sounded like a riot. "My rug, the silk rug," Beatrice shrieked. The third log was the finale. I had packed it with a combination of magnesium and copper. The chimney let out a sound like a giant clearing its throat, and then a blinding strobe-like white and blue light pulsed through her living room windows. From the outside, it looked like an alien spacecraft was landing in her foyer. The aftermath. By the time the fire department arrived, the show was over. There was no actual fire. I had been careful with the chemistry, but there was a lot of smoke. A lot of very colorful, very thick smoke. The firefighters marched into the house, followed by the police. I walked out to my front curb, joining the rest of the neighbors who had come out in their bathrobes to see the commotion. Beatrice was standing on her lawn, her beige tracksuit stained with soot. Her hair, usually a perfect silver bob, was frizzed out like she'd stuck her finger in a light socket. "It attacked me," she was shouting at a confused-looking fire captain. "The fireplace, it turned into a demon. It was green and red. It was an assault." The fire captain emerged from the house holding the charred remains of one of my oak logs. He sniffed it. He looked at the soot on the hearth. Then he looked at Beatrice. "Ma'am, did you put something in the fire? A firework, a flare?" "Of course not," she snapped. "Well," the captain said, "the chimney is fine, but your living room is covered in chemical residue. It's going to take a professional cleaning crew weeks to get the smell out. Where did you get the wood?" Beatrice froze, her eyes darted toward my house. She saw me standing there, leaning against my mailbox, waving a small, friendly wave. She had two choices. She could admit she stole the wood from me, which would lead to a police report and the end of her reign as HOA president. Or she could claim she bought it from a mystery vendor and look like a fool who didn't know how to build a fire. I bought it from a roadside stand," she stammered, her face turning a shade of red that matched the strontium sparks. "I don't remember where." The fire captain sighed. "Well, don't go back there. They're selling wood contaminated with heavy metals. You're lucky the house didn't burn down." The new order. The Great Chimney Incident, as it came to be known, was the beginning of the end for Beatrice Vance. The board members who were present that night were so shaken by the supernatural fire and the fact that Beatrice had nearly blinded them with magnesium light that they called for a vote of no confidence. 2 weeks later, Beatrice put a "for sale" sign in her yard. She couldn't walk down the street without someone asking her if she'd seen any green ghosts lately. The day she moved out, I was in my backyard splitting a new cord of wood. I saw her packing her garden cart into the back of a moving van. She looked over the fence at me, her eyes narrowed in pure, unadulterated hatred. "You did that," she hissed, making sure the movers were out of earshot. "You put something in those logs." I leaned on my axe and smiled. It was the smile of a man who had finally found peace. "I don't know what you're talking about, Beatrice, but I did hear a rumor that some wood can react strangely when it's displaced. It's a phenomenon called karmic combustion." She sputtered, unable to find a rule in the HOA handbook to cover karmic combustion. She climbed into her van and drove away, leaving Willow Creek forever. That evening, I started a fire in my own pit. I used regular, untreated birch. The flames were a simple, beautiful orange. Arthur walked over with 2 glasses and a bottle of high-end rye. "You know, Elias," Arthur said, taking a seat. "I've lived here 20 years. I've never seen a sunset as bright as the one that came out of Beatrice's chimney." "It was a rare sight, Arthur," I agreed, clinking my glass against his. The wood popped softly in the cool night air. It was quiet, it was peaceful, and most importantly, every single log in the pile belonged exactly where it was.